The struggles that unfolded in the 60s, the 50s, the 60s, and 70s have come to fruition. Excuse me. But it's not the victory many people have expected it to be. Conditions have not changed. Structures have not changed. There are probably more black poor people today than 30 years ago. There's certainly more black people and more people in general in prison than anywhere else in the world. So while there have been victories in some areas, we don't have the explicit racism, the segregation that we had in the earlier era. But the structural racism is perhaps even worse than it was.
The poor are the black people now.
Exactly.
So is it a class thing or is it a racial?
Well, I don't think you can say either or. It's both. It's both and. It's always both. And it's also about gender. It's also about other issues, you know, such as the environment. My approach over the last years has been to try to understand the interconnections, the ways in which all of our struggles are linked, that we cannot have a powerful anti-racist struggle if we don't have a strong workers' movement, if we don't have a strong women's movement. And I think that rather than ask people to choose which is the most important, we have to say they're all equally important. I do think that we need to be more connected. There's not a sense of connectedness. And one of the things that was so powerful during that era was that we felt connected with people all over the world, even though we didn't have an internet, even though we could not communicate in the way we can now. We felt this powerful connection with people here in France, with people all over Europe, with people struggling for their liberation in Africa, with people in Cuba and all over Latin America. There was this sense that we were a profound community of struggle.
You went through a time where people were dreaming a lot.
Yes, that's true.
And it seems that everyone is dreaming about these dreams from the 60s
or
the 60s, 70s. And we don't see no proper dreams from the time from now, which is strange. I mean,
yeah, well, but the thing is that a lot of those dreams were never fulfilled, right? There was the dream of African liberation, and there was Amilcar Cabral, and of course there was Nelson Mandela, and there were the struggles in South Africa and all over the Portuguese colonies. And to a certain extent, the decolonization was successful. But even in South Africa, which was the model for people all over the world, they still have major problems. There's still police violence, and there's still a lot of racism in South Africa. So they're unfulfilled dreams. As long as they're unfulfilled dreams, we can try to conjure them up again. And even Dr. Martin Luther King, the media, the established media, have tried to freeze one moment, the I Have a Dream speech, as if that's the only thing that he ever did. But towards the end of his life, Dr. King was talking about capitalism, imperialism. He was organizing a poor people's campaign, which in many ways prefigured the Occupy movement, because it was about an encampment around the White House. And he said people should stay there until the politicians responded to their problems. So there are ways in which that era and this era, you see, the end of that era was in many ways premature. Those struggles should have continued. They didn't necessarily continue then, so we're continuing them today in the 21st century.
Just to give us a precision, was about the link you made between slavery and penitentiary, what would you call the gulag of democracy?
Yes, yes.
Could you explain it a bit? so it's a long story.
Yeah, and let me say that this year is the 150th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. And there have been no celebrations. There have been no observances in the US. And that's very bizarre. And you know, I think that it may well be because they realize that if we were to begin a massive public conversation about slavery, everyone would realize that slavery is still with us, that there's so many vestiges of slavery, that it wasn't really abolished. And the fact that there are more black men behind bars and under the control of the criminal justice system in the second decade of the 21st century than there were in slavery in 1850. So that's quite amazing. 2.5 million people in prison. The US has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's in prison population. And so just as there was the assumption that there could be democracy with slavery, in the 19th century, there's the assumption that there can be democracy with the largest imprisoned population in the world today. And I think people are beginning to recognize that.
What would be the moral, let's say, the moral of that story, of your story?
Well, I think the moral of the story is that if you organize, if you bring masses of people together, if you bring people together across racial boundaries, across national boundaries, if you unite and organize and struggle, it's possible to win. There was a time when many people would have said, even though she's not guilty, there is no way that she can win against Richard Nixon, against Ronald Reagan. Yes. And the fact is, people didn't listen to that. And they organized, and we did win. And so it's the victory that is so important for people to understand today. So yes, we need this sense that we can win. If we organize, if we unite, if we struggle, we can win.